So is the lesson for the student or for the instructor? All right, today we're going to take a look at the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. We're going to take a look at a couple statements he makes in the water chapter. So while the point of the chapter is talking about other systems, towards the end of the chapter, he makes a couple of very interesting comments about the way he teaches, the way he approaches teaching. I've personally always been drawn to universal principles, principles that are broadly applicable to life. If you can learn a lesson from one area that you can apply to other areas, you're making more efficient use of your time when you're learning. And even though this book is about martial arts, combative arts, however you want to put it, anytime you can learn something from one subject that you can apply to other areas, that's just efficient use of your time. So I think it may frustrate some people that I'm not just focused on the martial aspect of this, but I feel like there are an abundance of people that talk about the martial aspect of Musashi, and at some point I'm sure I will. But for the most part, this channel is about wisdom from older books that is broadly applicable to life. So, in the water chapter, we have some very interesting comments about teaching. So, today, what I'm reading from is the William Scott William translation of Miyamoto Musashi, the Book of Five Rings. And this is in the section where he's talking about interior and exterior and other styles. My way of teaching the martial arts is to take a man who is a beginner in the way, have him learn according to those skills that he may develop well, teach him principles that he will quickly understand first, see through the places where his mind may be suitable for matters not easily understood, and gradually teach him the deeper principles later. Now, for me, the most important part of that is kind of the latter part of the statement. Teach him principles that he will quickly understand first, see through the places where his mind may be suitable for matters not easily understood, and gradually teach him the deeper principles later. Now, in my view, part of what he's talking about is the lesson is about the students, not the instructor. This is something that I think is lost in education quite often, and in almost any level of education you can think of. Obviously, there are a lot of people out there that are teachers and instructors who are very deliberate about it and they care about their students. But I think a lot of people end up, well, one of the things in my notes is you have this idea of ego based teaching where the lesson is about the instructor or the teacher, and the lesson is really focused on their ego and how wonderful they are. There are some settings where ego-based teaching does have its place. When someone does this correctly, and you're trying to help a student sort of reframe their mindset and setting a certain example for them that they're trying to get to, in very specific situations, it has its place. But in those instances, it's not a situation where the instructor is amazing and indomitable and the student will never match them. It should be that they've attained a certain level of whatever the subject is, and that's also available to the student given enough time and enough effort. Okay, the second quote I want to go to that relates to this, he says, observing the strength of knowledge of the person studying this way, I teach him what is correct, have him discard the failings of the various other styles of the martial arts, and direct him naturally into the true way of the practice of a warrior with no doubts in his mind. For me, the two parts of that quote that are key are observing the strength of the knowledge of the person studying this way and directing him naturally into the true way of the practices of a warrior with no doubts in his mind. Again, the lesson is about the student, not the instructor. Now, what do you do with this? You might be sitting there watching this and thinking, you don't teach. You might have employees, you might have children, you might have customers. At some point in your life, you instruct something to someone. So the better you can get at identifying what people are good at and meeting them there and helping them grow from that point, the more effective your teaching is going to be. Now, when you have a big group of people, that can be difficult, if not impossible, to apply, especially if it's something like, in a military setting like basic training where you've got a group of people and they all have to get through a course of instruction in a certain period. But I also think that's one reason why they're in a unit, because within that unit, different people will have different strengths and they learn to support each other. Especially if you're doing any kind of private lessons or you're teaching in a small group, or even if it's kind of a moderate sized group and there are moments where you can interact individually with students or clients or whatever it is, I think it's critical to identify their strengths, figure out what they're good at. The lesson should be about the student, not you. Years ago, when I was a young instructor, just getting started teaching with self-defense, and in a lot of circles and a lot of subjects, I know it can be very, sometimes instructors blow off steam. Even sometimes in certain work environments, employees will blow off steam. Coworkers will blow off steam talking about customers or clients or whatever it is. But sometimes instructors will blow off steam talking about students. Some people are not good students. There's levels to that. And sometimes things just aren't a good fit and someone might need to go learn from someone else. That's fine. I've had most of my experiences with students have been very positive, but there have been a couple people over the years where we just didn't connect. One of the things I learned from a guy named John Clark, who's a very good instructor. We were talking shop one day, and we were reminiscing some stories about some students who just had kind of unfortunate moments in a couple different classes. And it was funny, and we were amused, and so on and so forth. And I'm sure that, the next time I see John, we will probably reminisce over those same stories because they're memorable and they're funny. However, after a bit, he told me something he learned from a guy named Greg Hamilton, which is which was kind of an ego. Well, it wasn't kind of an ego check. It was an ego check for me. And that thing was, when you're teaching, if the student doesn't understand the lesson, that is the instructor's responsibility. I think he phrased it a little bit differently than that, but especially when people are, seeking you out and coming to you to learn from you, it's if you're teaching from a place of your ego and you're not identifying what's appropriate for the student and helping the student be as good as they can, why are you teaching? Those are some thoughts on teaching from the Water chapter from the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. Go read a book.